so this is it. This is the 992 Carrera that we're going to be testing on this week. It is a 992 Carrera base. So this car is got the 3-liter motor. It has the base turbocharger. So these are actually the small, really responsive turbos. So M Engineering offers a number of products for this car. We've got our M Coder, M Tuner, which adds a bunch of power to the car. It's in a beautiful gentian blue color, and we're looking forward to tossing it on the dyno. But I want to talk a little bit about the exhaust system here with John Gatos from Soul. So, John, you want to talk a little bit about what's on this car, what we're putting on it?
Absolutely. Firstly, let's talk about the stock exhaust and what we have going on here. Underneath these heat shields, you have your factory turbo manifolds that are feeding your smaller, more peppy turbos on the base and the T models. From there, you're going to go into a nice, dense factory catalytic converter, which then goes into a stock box where the mufflers on all of these 992.1s are electronically actuated now. So no matter what, even if you don't have a PSE, you still have a valved exhaust system. These electronic valves are actuated here on the back side, and the PSE has a very slightly larger diameter primary flow path for valves open. When it comes to exhaust changes, I want to run you through a few things that we have here. We're mostly talking about character and tone change as well as sound level. We've limited some of the configurations due to timing. We skipped the manifolds, as the most popular things that people want to see are related to the cats and the muffler changes. What we've got here on the left side are the modular cat replacements. We've got a set of high flow catted link pipes here, as well as a set of competition link pipes here for track use. Those, when you replace these stock cats, gets rid of that super dense factory cat core for a much less dense or not dense at all, and that will be your amplifier of whatever you have down here. So you're going to get significantly more sound level of whatever you have. On a valved exhaust system, the delta of closed versus open is going to become greater, because obviously when the valves are open, less restriction, you hear more of the change in the cats. You're also going to get more turbo spool sound out of a cat replacement. So if that's something that you're after, you're going to get more of that out of a cat replacement than you will a muffler change. If you don't want to touch your cats, or if you want to add to a set of high flow cats and change your character and tone quality, you've got a valved exhaust system here and a non-valved exhaust system. Your best return on investment for overall sound level change out of just a muffler is going to be a non-valve configuration. This big chambered X pipe, as well as the resonators, have this be a little more sophisticated than just straight piping a car. It maintains a more reasonable low RPM cabin presence at cruising speed, and is also going to give you a richer, smoother tone quality as you go through the RPM range than even a stock exhaust, where there is no blending of the exhaust flow. Now, if you want something like that, but you want the ability to have even more comfort at low RPMs or fly under the radar with the valves closed, we do have our valved exhaust system here. It has a smaller muffler than stock, so even when the valves are closed, you have more of an experience inside the car, and then you can bypass it, valves open, through an X pipe. It won't have quite the volume of that, because you still have some residual bleed off into the muffler, but overall, it's still a nice, tasteful addition to the car if you're trying to be a little bit more cognizant of who's in the car with you and exterior of the car volume. If you're going for the most power you can, you need to get rid of this modular connection pipe that reduces down to 2.75 and utilize the best flow that you can. So we also have this table here, which is our performance exhaust system. Now, when we get rid of the connection flange that's modular between the cats and our rear sections here, we're able to move the X pipe back by having a bespoke bend profile of the cat assemblies. By doing that, we can also add anti-drone tubes to the rear X pipe system to make it even more comfortable at lower RPMs than combining link pipes with our standard X. So most people that would go to a full performance exhaust system that's replacing this, the cat assemblies and the rear muffler with a non-valve pipe, should go right towards this, because it's going to make more power, have more volume, and be more comfortable than mix and matching those two parts together.
Well, it's going to be a fun week. We're going to go ahead and toss this on the dyno. We're going to run it in a bone stock configuration, baseline it, see what kind of power it makes, and then we're going to play with every configuration possible.
You're right.
So, we are. Awesome. Let's get to it. little bit kind of behind on how we did this testing. We did test this car in the stock form first, and we did a number of runs with it. We've got the most average run presented here, and anytime we tested a new configuration or a new tune file, we would find the most average run, and this is what we're going to show to you guys to give you kind of the best idea of what these exhaust changes do.
Absolutely. You know, there's at some point with software, you start to hit diminishing returns out of the exhaust. So what does what until what point is kind of what we're going to be going over here. So 347 wheel horsepower, 319 wheel torque as a baseline. So if you are not looking to touch the catalytic converters on the car and your concentration is going to be for a character and tone change as well as the most volume at the same time, you're going to go after replacing your muffler with a non-valved X-pipe. So this is a non-valved X-pipe by itself.
We're up not quite 20 wheel horsepower, up a few foot-pounds of torque. Of course, on this graph, the line we chose maybe kind of had a little bit of a rough start on the dyno, but that's just dyno operation error. Essentially, from 5,000 RPMs and up, you're up 10 to 20 wheel horsepower and 10 to 20 wheel torque throughout that whole power band. So it's a nice little pickup, and the sound was fantastic too.
So from a non-valved exhaust perspective, that's always going to be your best return. Moving on from there, our valved exhaust system.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and pull that one up.
So that as well is roughly, let's say, similar in terms of performance.
About the same.
And if we even overlay that with the X-pipe, there's very, slight, after, initial dyno hit, there's very slight overlaps throughout the rest of the curve. So we would say that's very comparable and near identical in terms of performance between the non-valved and the valved exhaust system. Yet the valved exhaust system allows you to have a more conservative overall sound level change and a more comfortable fly under the radar experience, especially in cabin at low RPMs. Throughout the entire power curve, you can see the change between the blue baseline and the red and orange are quite similar throughout the rest of the curve. If we're looking at baseline, you can see little performance improvements through the low end of the mid-range until you hit the mid-range. And at that point, you start to really, the Sport Cats have a lot of top-end power. So from there, you start to get to that, 10 to 20 after the 5K mark. Peak numbers ended up being 362 wheel horsepower and 312 wheel torque, only because, dyno hitting in the beginning. So now this was a stage 0 with the M coder with the valves open all the time, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go ahead and combine some exhaust components here, which would be this white graph. And so what exhaust configuration is this one, John?
So that is a combination of the high flow cats and the valved muffler system. So you can start to see, versus let's just say the muffler by itself, some cumulative gains throughout the curve. So especially down here, you can see the cat and valved exhaust combo start to pick up several horsepower throughout the curve together, and that averages out to being a notable gain. If you go and you look at a full non-valve system over even that, you can see the cumulative gains are even a little bit further. So now if you take out and you just look to stock from a catted exhaust, full exhaust configuration, these are the big numbers that you're going to be able to get. And that ended up being a total of 365 wheel horsepower and 325 wheel torque max.
And looking at this graph here, even though there's no added performance software, this is something you're going to absolutely be able to feel too.
And this is of course at wide open throttle on a dyno. As we've seen with stock Porsche software, typically as you start to really push the car at wide open throttle, the software starts to pull it down a little bit. When you're on partial throttle and drive around with exhaust changes, you feel a lot more responsiveness out of these cars, even over what this dyno curve says. From here, we can look at what a competition style of exhaust configurations would look like. So let's say you're doing a lot of track use and you want to chase less heat, less weight, less initial cost even, and get rid of the catalytic converter cores involved and then go with a competition style setup for track use. Then does that net you anything from a performance perspective?
The graph here of basically the sport cats versus the competition cats. Now they're pretty close, but there are a couple of differences. What can you tell us about what's going on here?
After the initial hit, as you're going through the curve here, you can see that the competition pipes and the sport cat pipes follow a very similar power curve until you hit just shy of 5,000 RPM. Then you can see the comp pipes starting to pull a little harder through the rest of the RPM range. You'll see, you know, for about 1,000 RPM wide here from 48 to 5,800 RPM, some, you know, a few horsepower and torque gain there. And then as you get into the last, you know, let's say 500 so RPM of the power curve, you get another little few horsepower up top. You know, if you're looking for less weight, less expense, less heat, overall more sound level, because they are clearly louder than a set of sport cats, then the competition pipes would have some value.
So looking here at this graph, we're going to be looking at two different cat combinations with valve mufflers. There's some interesting looking data here. You want to tell us a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, so blue is baseline, red is high flow cats with the valved muffler, and yellow is competition link pipes with the valved muffler. And you can see that once you get rid of the sport cats out of the equation, you know, I'd almost say it hits this mid-range here, and then it shoots to try to make more power, and then we start to hit the diminishing returns of what the ECU is trying to accommodate for.
Yeah, there's some torque limitations here that the ECU's, you know, seeing as a request. Maybe some stuff's getting overshot and it's pulling things back. So I think what we're running into here is definitely some software limitations. This exhaust is happy. It's trying to make some really big power on this car, but we're just being held back by the computer a bit.
It's this is where we start to hit these diminishing returns with the exhaust improvements before adding software into the equation. So you can see that it's trying to make more power, but it's pulling it back down, and it's just like, oh, I'm happy again. And then it starts to pull it back down again. You'll see much less of that when we start to integrate the software into play. But before we do that, let's see what the full non-valve performance package looks like. Street versus competition as well.
Yeah, let's get those pulled up.
So now we come to the full non-valve package comparisons. So let's say you wanted to go for the most overall sound level that you can possibly get, but you also at the same time want the least amount of heat possible, least amount of weight possible. This is our performance exhaust system, sport versus competition versus baseline. So you'll see the blue line is the stock, and then you'll see the yellow is the sport version of our performance system, and the green is the competition style. Different areas of the curve, such as the low end here, mid-range here, and then as you go through the top end, you're gonna see another few to a several horsepower improvement over the catted sport version of it. From there, you just have to determine whether or not that is worth the benefits to you versus the catted version. With exhaust systems on stock software, you hit a lot of diminishing returns. Here's what you can expect between a sport and a comp system. And now if you get rid of the incremental gains that you're getting out of different things, going from sport to comp, going from valve to non-valve, each going up a little bit in performance, you're starting to see more of a larger delta of change, especially in the low end and mid-range, and then through carrying through the top. That's all important. If you're looking to squeeze every little bit out of it as you can, then these are logical. But you have to remember, anytime it comes to a comp setup for track use, you're going to be running into a CEL to resolve that you should probably have software for anyway. So now moving from here on what just the exhaust does by itself, no software, we're going to start looking at what the exhaust can do with software. And we don't hit the diminishing returns of the software, but are we going to be hitting the diminishing returns of the turbo size? And that's what we're going to get into now.
We're going to find that out. Real quick, John, can you talk a little bit about the difference between the performance setup versus the regular setup with the different sport cats or the high flow cats? Because it doesn't have the reduction, correct?
This setup specifically, the performance system, you know, we're always limited on time and what we can do here and configurations. So this is our performance exhaust system where the link pipes and the muffler replacement are bespoke to get rid of that tubing reduction that you have at the connection point there, 2.75 inches. We're going up to a full 3-inch. Now, in doing that, the bend profiles are different, so we can push the X pipe back further, so we can fit some anti-drone tubes in there as well. So versus the standard cat replacement and our X pipe, where there's no room to add those things, now we can add that. So while it is louder overall and sound level, and it has more flow potential. It at the same time is more comfortable at lower RPMs versus a modular configuration. So rather than do all the dyno testing of the connection of an X pipe and a standard modular cat, we went right to our performance system to save a little bit of time, because this would be the logical way to go about it for those that are doing it the first time.
All right, so before we go into the different exhaust configurations with software, I just wanted to go over the before and after software tuning with stock exhaust only. So on this graph here, you'll see a pretty dramatic change in torque and horsepower throughout the entire rev range. This is actually our off-the-shelf tune for 93 octane. I mean, we're already seeing gains of a 200 foot-pound gain in torque, max gains of horsepower well over 100 at some of these points in the graph. With even just a software change, it's a completely different car. The exciting part now is to couple this with some really high-flowing exhaust parts and see what that does to this whole combination here. So John, things are getting pretty interesting here with just software changes and muffler only changes. Let's go over these. Some of these gains down low are pretty impressive. So what exactly is going on with these changes here?
So the stock valves open flow path on the base models is relatively small. So when we go up to a full 3-inch after the connection point, the car responds very well. The turbos like it. When you've uncorked the software and there's no longer those limitations on the software side trying to push it down, you get a lot more initial low RPM kind of responsiveness here. So putting on our X-pipe non-valved is the yellow here, which is, let's say around 20 horsepower and torque, and then that fades into a rough, let's say 5, maybe 10-ish throughout the rest of the RPM range over stock. Which that, 5 to 10 out of a muffler sounds, more realistic of what you would think outside of this big low-end responsiveness these small turbo cars get. If you look at the valved muffler system, you even get more of that responsiveness down here as well. So you're getting about double the gains. Let's say 40 to 50 foot-pounds in this area under 4K, and then also, let's say around the 20-25 foot-pounds of torque. So the valve muffler system responds extremely well, especially.
Yeah, right over the stock muffler. It should be noted too, software plus this valve muffler, this is a 200 foot-pound, peak torque gain right down here. This is on the hit. So hopefully you've got really good tires. We're actually returning back to the stock muffler, but we're changing out between sport cats and competition cats. So it looks like we're probably going to be picking up some really good turbo response and turbo spool, but I see a fairly big difference between the sport cat and comp cats down low. You want to go into that a little bit?
Sure. So anytime you're running a competition style link pipes without the sport cats on there, you're going to, on a turbocharged car, have a really quick initial responsiveness and hit, because the turbos are free. They don't have any real restriction rate after them. So you can see clearly here, this yellow, the red is tune only, and then the yellow is the sport cats, and then the green is competition. If you look at the green, anytime you're under that 3,500 RPM mark, the responsiveness of the turbos is much, much stronger in that low end. And then once you start to crest past that 3,500 mark, you got a little bit through the mid-range here that the high flow cats outperform. And then from there, it becomes pretty much even Stevens all the way through. That's, from a comparison standpoint between the comp cats and the sport cats, then, from there, you can kind of determine which you want to go with depending on your goals with software, especially in overall sound level, because the difference between the comp cats and the sport cats is going to be significant.
We're actually moving on to my favorite setup, which is the valve muffler with either the competition or the sport cats. I think it sounds fantastic. I think it's what the customer ended up eventually choosing on the car, correct?
That's exactly right, the catted version specifically,
So the monster power gains are, again, just everywhere, which is fantastic. I think you'll also kind of see towards the end of the graph, we're kind of at a point too where pro tuning starts to make a lot of sense. This is such a free-flowing system that taking the extra mile with software tuning, which we're going to show you guys later, can really help kind of pick up some of this stuff in the high end. But John, you want to kind of go over these different graphs here?
Sure. As you'd normally expect out of exhaust systems through the 4,000 RPM and above, you're averaging anywhere around like maybe let's say 20, 25 foot-pounds of torque and horsepower to the tire on top of what the software is adding. However, the software has now unrestricted the potential of is what that exhaust can do on these smaller turbo cars in the low end where that car really wants to spool up fast, and that exhaust is super restricted. So if you look under 4,000 RPM, red line to green line, red line to yellow line, especially also down here where the horsepower is, even on top of what the software's added, we're picking up
75 to 100
Tell me
foot-pounds.
that's not
Yeah.
75 to 100
Yeah.
foot-pounds of torque.
On the hit.
And,
Yeah.
over 50 wheel horsepower. Under 4,000 RPM, exhaust makes all the difference with software. So there is a really tangible performance improvement, especially in the low end of the power curve on the smaller turbo cars, once software has uncorked those limitations. The difference that you're seeing here, green to yellow, is the difference between a Sport Cat valved exhaust system and a competition with valved exhaust system. So you can see clearly the turbos respond a little better without the Sport Cats there, both torque and horsepower in about, let's say, 20 to 25 torque and let's say 10-ish horsepower on top of what the Sport Cats offer. So we're starting to hit diminishing returns on what the turbos can even do.
Yeah.
So
the base has got some small turbos too, so they're out of steam.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
they're out of breath.
So we know they're starting to run out of steam. So how do we squeeze any little extra horsepower out of here? Now we're at 423 horsepower and 530 wheel torque on this specifically. It's insane.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, the delta of change is just remarkable. It's not even the same car. All right, so the graphs that we have up here are the non-valve configuration, the performance exhaust. The red is the tuned, the green is the Sport Cat, and the yellow is the competition version of the performance exhaust system. Now this is the larger 3-inch for more flow potential. It is the bespoke full system. As you guys have experienced on the big turbo builds like 992 turbos, running the bigger turbos, it is essential to making the most power that you can in those kind of situations.
I have not seen another 992 go in excess of 900 wheel horsepower unless we're using a sole competition 3-inch. So that's the only way to do it.
Now on these smaller turbos specifically, it looks like we've got a little less gain down in the super low end of the power curve with the larger non-valved exhaust system versus the valved exhaust configuration mixed with high flow cats and competition pipes. However, as you start to get up through the mid-range, there are some more tangible mid-range and top-end gains to the tune of about 5, maybe another 10 horsepower or so out of the non-valved versus the valved configuration. Again, as you can see here, once these turbos catch some steam, you will see the comp clearly outperform the sport version of it. Those turbos like to breathe.
Yes.
So anyone that's looking for, maximizing the performance gains out of a situation that is non-valve for the most volume all the time, that would be something to consider when paired with their software.
The blue line here obviously is our bone stock exhaust, bone stock tune. The red is a stock exhaust running our stage 1 off-the-shelf map. If you look at the green line here, this is our stage 2 off-the-shelf map, running the Sport Cat combo with the valve muffler, and it makes great power. Peaking just over 500 foot-pounds, it makes about 410 horsepower. But as soon as we get a look at the data and we can play with some of the lambda targets, some of the boost tables, we can also play with ignition timing, some of the torque interpolation, we're really able to make this shine. So we did a pro tuning session on this car with pump gas on 93 octane. We were actually able to max it out around 435 horsepower. So we picked up 25 horsepower with just pro tuning alone. But where it really shines is the mid-range. Around 5,000 RPMs and up, you're at, maybe 30 to 40 horsepower and torque gains throughout that whole power band. To top it off, we also ProTune this car on race gas. The gas of choice here was MS109, which is a VP fuel. 5,000 RPMs and up, you can see it above the 93 ProTune. It's still making 20 to 30 horsepower more. We actually ended up making a total of 455 wheel horsepower. So this, again, is a Carrera base with the tiny little stock turbos with Sol's exhaust system. So it's pretty incredible what you can do on this platform.
Well, as soon as you started playing around with the ProTune and this mid-range came back alive, this is from just shy of 5,000 RPM all the way to 6,700 RPM, this big fat lump of additional power that you're able to get out of this car. You're looking at another solid 50 wheel horsepower and torque. It's shocking. I mean, kudos to you guys.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. Awesome. I got all a little cocky about how much low end we were able to gain, and then you came right back in and got all the top end back out.
Let's top it out. This was a pleasure, John. This was a really fun project. It was quite a long week, and couldn't have done it without you, man. This is good stuff.
Time. Yeah, absolutely.